Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey of My Mother's Son podcast. Today, I'm joined with Jerry Fu, who's the founder of Adapting Leaders. Jerry, thanks for joining me on the show today.
Hey, Dan, excited to be here.
Absolutely. So before we get started, just give my listeners a little bit of an introduction in your own words. Who is Jerry Fu today?
Yeah, Jerry Fu is a lover of the art of conversation. Jerry is a lover of storytelling and storyteller, and loves all sorts of cultural things, whether it's food or dancing or literature. Jerry is also in the middle of a job transition between, his full-time job as a pharmacist and building his adapting leaders coaching business and seeing where that plane takes off and when it will take off for good.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And I love the fact that, to try to stick Jerry in a box, like it can't be done because there are these so many different tentacles of interest that you have. And I just love that. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show, because I know,
Yeah.
For myself, a lot of times, people want to just, stick you in a box. I had been I'd coached youth sports for 30 years, primarily baseball and softball. So,
Mm.
everybody would kind of refer to me as, the baseball guy or this or that. But there's so much more to me than just baseball. And even now, I'm not just the RV guy. I'm a guy who, loves music, loves, exploring, loves nature. And, so when I kind of saw, all the stuff that made Jerry who you are, I was like, all right, this is a guy I want to talk to because I think we could go a lot of different directions in this conversation for sure. So,
Yeah.
let's kind of start there. I mean, when when people do want to put you in a box, like what is, you know, your your response, when someone's trying to say, well, this is who Jerry should be, and you're like, well, no, there's a whole lot more that makes up who I am.
Yeah, yeah. It's if the one term that could kind of be the catch-all, you could say, without necessarily like limiting me, is a dabbler. That would be, the title of my autobiography to say, Jerry, what would you name your own book? And I would say the dabbler, because I dabble in languages. I'm not fluent in any of them, right? Like I dabble in a lot of different hobbies, and there's only so much mastery you can get unless you really work on your craft. And so but when people start to put me in the box of, oh, he's an outsider, or he's a math nerd, or he's a musician, and what I tell people, the irony is that all these different communities I'm a part of, whether it's dancing or music or otherwise, my closest friends are not in any of those necessarily skill sets. It's the people who like to eat Asian cuisine, because those are the only times we actually have a conversation to get to know each other, is to spend time eating food that I like. And so it's an interesting intersection, because all these other friends, they're great. I see them all the time, and at the same time, the people that are closest in my life are the ones that I'm willing to share a meal over. So that's a starting point for discussion, anyway.
That's cool. And it's funny where you said, a dabbler. It's, again, very similar to me, where it's like I, I I know enough about a lot of different things to be very dangerous,
Yeah.
but not always helpful sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but so um, you're you're a musician as well. So what do you play? How did you get involved in that? And um, you know, what do you enjoy about it?
Yeah, yeah. So this is one of those things I didn't appreciate what my parents invested in me until later in life, right? Like they started me off on piano and violin lessons like in kindergarten, and so I didn't know that I could quit, and so that sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And in this case, I played piano and violin up through about maybe halfway or late high school career. I stopped uh, violin lessons first because, number one, I outgrew my violin. And when my violin teacher suggested I switch over to the viola, my parents were not willing to invest in another instrument. So they just said, well, stop this, and, we'll stop youth orchestra because your academic load is starting to get heavier. And then when I got to my senior year of high school, I stopped piano lessons because yeah, like that's the one loophole if you want to quit like music lessons as a kid is you just say I have too much schoolwork and then my parents will stop. I was classically trained on both, so I'm not very good at improv, and I listen to all sorts of jazz now, and I'm just jealous of the fact that they just know how to riff off a theme, and I'm not there yet. So that journey kind of took a pause maybe halfway through college until some friends of mine were kind enough to teach me rhythm acoustic guitar so I can do like 4 or 5 or 6 basic chords, and that helps with like leading worship or other things or playing my own pop songs or stuff like that. And then it wasn't until I moved back to Houston 12 years ago where I really started to love music for myself. Like I kind of like playing the guitar, but I was too self-conscious about playing guitar for other people. I hated recitals as a kid just because I just didn't like playing for other people. I just too self-conscious. But then when I got in certain environments where it felt like it was safe to fail, where there wasn't like an audience that was going to boo me or anything like that. It just got a lot easier to really grow. Like I helped out lead worship with Celebrate Recovery when I met some other musician friends when I moved back to Houston, and that kind of audience is just happy to have live music. They're not going to boo you over your song selection or if you did a poor job. You just realize you can. This is a place where I kind of get over my own fears. And so when I also started learning music for myself, not just what I was classically trained to play, but then I was figuring out, the keyboard to like Queen's Bohemian Rhapsody or other R&B songs or other um, rock songs that I would do, piano renditions of. And I just happened to have roommates with like piano, like electronic keyboards. And so that was a very fortunate coincidence. And so, yeah, I finally got to really embrace music for myself, and very grateful for my parents to invest in what they did so I could enjoy this for myself and not just to show off for them as like the trophy son.
Yeah, and I mean I absolutely love music. I'm not a musician. I did play bass a little bit when I was in high school, but just didn't have the uh, concentration level to really work at it. So I gave that up and still had my bass sitting around my house for probably another 10 years after that till finally I gave it to my nephew, who is a incredible guitarist, self-taught, and just incredibly talented. And I really have no idea where he got his musical talent, but he has gotten a lot more out of my old bass guitar than what I ever did, for sure. And he's the type of kid who he can pick up anything with a string on it and figure out how to play it in almost no time flat. So at this point, I've relegated solely to the harmonica and
Mm,
enjoy sitting around and if somebody's got a guitar, enjoy pitching in on that and having fun with that. But that's it. But as
yeah.
far as just taste in music, I've got such a broad, wide variety of taste from classical to rock and roll to blues to country, you name it.
Mm,
I'll listen to any good music and love hearing the passion that goes into to creating music. So I mean, we spent a week in Memphis back in
mm,
March, and
mhm,
the music in Memphis was just one of the things that just any music lover I recommend. If you haven't been to Memphis, you need to get to Memphis and spend a week there for sure, because it's you know so many just broad ranges of music outside of just blues and soul.
mhm,
And really when you dig down into it, like all music we have kind of came from you know gospel, in the
mhm.
fields and
Yeah.
sharecropper songs and that sort of stuff. So it's really cool when you kind of dig into the history of it as well. So um, I think it's awesome that you were able to kind of take that childhood experience in classical and be able to, turn it into, to what you're doing today. Um,
Mhm.
which is very cool for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
what are kind of your, do you have any more, greater aspirations in music at this point, or you're just kind of taking it as it goes and playing when you can and honing it as best you can?
Yeah, yeah. It's a fair ongoing evaluation, you could say, because when I was dating a woman who like really loved music, and she loved it when I played guitar for her. I played more often than I had in the last couple of months because I was at this tough crossroads where if I had to choose between playing music at a jam session or going out salsa dancing, I chose salsa dancing every time. And I knew that I didn't want to get rusty either, though. And so I knew I needed to strategically put, opportunities to play on my calendar. Otherwise, I wouldn't keep up with it. Right. And so, um, yeah, it's just, I'll play every once in a while just to, if there's a worship opportunity with some friends, that's probably what keeps me honest. And, if I can be fortunate enough to help out with like wedding gigs or something like that. I haven't actively networked that lately, but it is always an ongoing thing of someday maybe, you know what, let me revisit this and see if it's something, an avenue I want to pursue deeper. So for right now, it's not as high on the list compared to like building my business and going out dancing. But I think given the joy that we both share in both listening to, lots of different kinds of music and the performance high that comes from just, playing an instrument and things like that, I can never eliminate it for good.
Yeah,
So here it
yeah,
is. Yeah.
no doubt. So you just brought up another box that I don't think many people would put Jerry into, and that
Hmm.
is salsa dancing.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are just listening on audio and not watching this conversation on YouTube,
Hmm.
Jerry is not your stereotypical salsa dancer.
Yeah.
He is not Latin. He's
Nope.
Asian.
Yeah.
um, so how did you get involved in that? And like, what is it about salsa dancing that, just drove you to it? I mean, it just hearing you talk about it even a little bit and mentioning,
Uh-huh.
as a crossover in the music, you could just kind of see your eyes light up when you mentioned salsa dancing. So, what got you into salsa dancing?
Yeah, it's quite the journey. Let me tell you, Dan, I'll be happy to tell people. Trying to convince Hispanic women I know what I'm doing is just, it's an uphill battle. Like I've just accepted that for like the rest of my life,
It's like, no,
unless I give
seriously,
them
just
social
let me
proof.
get out there. Yeah.
Yeah, just give me one dance and then I'll leave you alone. Right? Really, you get thicker skin. So, and that's the blessing in that. So the funny thing is, it started my freshman year in college where we had a spring formal and it was salsa dancing themed, and so they taught us a courtesy lesson. But here's the thing, Dan, it was a bad lesson. Like they didn't teach us good fundamentals, they didn't teach us anything useful. And the problem, right, is if you get a bad lesson but you don't know it's a bad lesson, you just think you're a bad student, or at least that was the first conclusion I reached. And so, me and my date were trying to dance this, and we're like, this is hard and boring. So, I was just very pessimistic about my own competence, and so I just said, well, I must be bad at this. Like it's not the dance, I just will never get the hang of it. So I just shelved it for like forever, or at least I thought I was just going to shelve it and never touch it again. And still very much tentative whenever someone brought up the subject. And then halfway through pharmacy school, one of my other friends I knew through church, who said, hey, my other friend is starting the scene up in Memphis, you got to give another chance. And so by now, my grades had solidified to the point where if I just got sick of studying, I knew I could take a night out a week and not really worry about my grades. And so I put some real money into it, and after enough time, you start to get the hang of things, and then you're sitting there thinking, you know what, maybe I could put in a little more work and see what happens. And then so by the time I was about done with pharmacy school, I was actually going out regularly on my own to dance and try to get the hang of this. I bought my own, DVD, and just being like, oh, I gotta now I want to study this for myself when I don't have other instructors available. And yeah, I got to a point where I was actually semi-competent at it, and I was enjoying myself. But then I graduated from pharmacy school, moved to a city where my family lived, and there was no salsa dancing. So I just got rusty, and when you get rusty, you lose confidence, even though you miss it. And then so it was just a really unproductive cycle for many years. And I would still try to go dancing. I would find other cities that were hosting like salsa dancing conventions, and I would try to go there. And I would just get so intimidated by the dancers there, even though there was a point when I was decent enough to feel good, social dancing, but I was nowhere near that. So mentally, I was just not in a good place to try to keep dancing. I'll tell people I went to one convention in like the Oakland area, and I was just so intimidated by the dance just like every night that I only danced with one girl the entire weekend. which is sad, right? You just get out there. There's only one way to get better. But in my mind, I'm just thinking, oh, like I don't want them to think less of me as a dancer. So let me just not embarrass myself or give myself the chance to get embarrassed. And even after I moved back to Houston 12 years ago, most of the friends that I met uh, were into country dancing. So salsa dancing still stayed kind of dormant. There would be flashes of brilliance here and there because I would still go out on my own, but it wasn't consistent. Like this is my A game all the time, kind of dancing. And it wasn't until 8 years ago. And I tell you, Dan, one of my Venezuelan friends had invited me to a free salsa dancing event in downtown Houston at the aquarium. And I tell people, all it took was one skilled, pretty blonde. I saw her and I'm just like, I got to dance with her because I could see that she was really good. And finally got my chance and, just locked in a game. All the moves came out. I threw everything that I could at the wall to see what stuck. And, she gave me a hug afterward. And I just asked myself, why did I stay away from this for so long? Just because I was just mentally beating myself up, right? And I said, okay, I'm back. I gotta make more time for this. I gotta make this a more regular thing. And yeah, it's just been beautiful since then, just to connect with other dancers and help other people love dancing as much as I love dancing.
Yeah, that's cool. And yeah, coming from a guy who literally does have two left feet, man, I all respect for you for just being able to get out there and do it, because I would probably be falling over myself, tripping over my feet, and the whole 9 yards. So I'm truly the guy with zero rhythm, without a
Fair
doubt.
enough.
So
I mean, look, I tell people, if it's any encouragement, Dan, I mean, I remember the first 6 months or so, I didn't think I'd ever get it. It took me about a year before I finally felt like I had enough. And if it's any encouragement, again, it's not the guy who has the most moves that has the most fun. People think that guys are insecure. Like I thought that for the longest time. I was just being insecure. Oh, only having like 5 moves, and what I do once I run out, right? Instead of, you say you get to a point of like intermediate, level competence, and you just have a big smile and you make the women you dance with feel like the prettiest girl on the floor. A fun beginner is going to see more attention than an insecure intermediate. And so, or, if you just say, hey, look, I haven't had the best tracker with this. I just tell people, I'm just like, let's try for 6 months. There's some Groupons that make it super cheap to just invest. So it's not a large investment of money. But yeah, after 6 months, you feel like don't get the hang of it. Okay. You gave it another shot, and I'm going to use my time and energy toward other things. So just be encouraged. I tell people, no one is exempt from doing the work. Some people may pick it up sooner than others, and that's okay. But yeah, just be encouraged. If you want to put in the work, try it out. And if not, then if it doesn't work out, then hey, you know what? You gave it your best shot. So celebrate that.
there you go.
Yeah.
So what what led you from you know being a pharmacist
Mm-hmm.
into coaching,
Yeah.
and specifically kind of your expertise in coaching is in conflict resolution. So like how did that transition start? And I understand it's still ongoing till you
Yeah.
get it into a full
Mm-hmm.
time on the coaching side, but
Mm-hmm.
where exactly did that come from? What was the inspiration there?
Yeah, yeah. It's one of those weird things where your biggest struggle becomes your biggest fascination. And leadership was something I struggled with for a long, long time. And specifically learning to have difficult conversations when things aren't meeting expectations, right? And so before I used to approach it as, oh, it's not worth the headache. I just don't want to deal with it. I've never been good at it. I probably won't ever be good at it. And so I put a ceiling on my own ability and possibilities, right? So I just didn't want the headache of leadership, especially in a chain pharmacy setting where I first started my career. You just saw what the managers went through, and you just said, that's a little more money for a lot more headaches. And, if that's what leadership is, I don't want it. And then when I got the chance to take on a teaching position through a pharmacy consulting company that I moved to Houston for, I said, okay, finally I'll be able to, maybe showcase what I'm really capable of. But I didn't get the job done. And so, my boss and I didn't get along because I wasn't getting the job done. And yeah, 11 months later, got fired, right? And it's hard to admit that, I was still, in this mentality of, as long as I'm better than 70% of my workforce or my teammates, that my boss will not be causing me any problems because I'm still better than 70%. And she can be mad at me, but I know she's gonna cut me more slack because she knows at the end of the day Jerry does a good job, even if we're mad at him. But now I'm being held accountable to the job I was supposed to do that I was hired for. And I used to think, well, as long as I spin a good enough yarn, spin a good enough story, that they should understand why I'm not getting the job done. Right. But that doesn't work, especially in entrepreneurship, right? And with smaller companies that you don't build a successful business on excuses or stories. You build a successful business on your bottom line. And so learned that lesson the hard way after they gave me several chances to prove myself. And I didn't, obviously, whatever lesson they're trying to get ahead through to me wasn't working. So eventually they just had to part ways. And so stumbled into another job. The second big reality check was I was filling prescriptions for crooked doctors while my paychecks bounced. And so I was jeopardizing my license, and this guy wasn't even paying me for it. How do you confront a boss that's clearly ripping you off, right? That's not in the life manual that anyone hands you. And so, again, right, this very difficult lesson just kept being shoved in my face, and I refused to engage it, right? And so, when I finally got out of that job after 9 months, my friends got me had leveraged their network to get me on with a different, more legitimate company, and that told me, "Hey, we like you, but we can't pay you more than 8 hours a week." I said, "Well, what do I do?" And they said, "Well, if you're willing to work for us at our Austin location, which is 2.5 hours away, could end up in worse cities, you can get more hours out there." And I said, "Well, beggars can't be choosers. I better drive out there and start working." And so that summer was key. This was 10 years ago now, and yeah, I was tapped to help teach some leadership workshops at a national seminar through a pharmacy leadership nonprofit run by some friends of mine. And they said, "We liked the fact that you were already facilitating workshops on the fraternity side. And now we need help on the leadership side. Are you available and willing?" And I said, "Absolutely," because I love this group of pharmacists so much. And so teaching leadership kind of helped unlock some possibilities in my head, because before I just shelved it and I just avoided it. And now I gave myself permission to believe that I might actually be good at this. And so when the opportunity to take on a full-time manager position opened up that fall, I knew I couldn't stay safe. I had a great work team in Austin, but I knew I couldn't stay comfortable. I wanted to sleep in my own bed again. So I thought naively or uninformedly that this would be, finally I can exhale. Finally, I can rest, that I have a nice job. It's short commute. I have benefits, my finally taking on this leadership challenge. And I proceed to get written up the following year because my technicians are not pulling their weight and I am not writing them up or firing them. And management said, their behavior is a problem and your passivity is a problem. So again, just the lesson right here. Hey, until you have this difficult conversation and you navigate it better, you won't get better. And when I convinced one of the problematic technicians to quit, that was more lucky than good. It was just like, oh, let me just kind of just nudge the domino off the edge of the table, and dook, okay, oh, and so something interesting happened while I was on probation. The company had their funding pulled, and so now I'm sitting there thinking, well, I was already going to quit, but now it's a little more urgent because I have no idea what my future will be like. The only reason I get a interview with my next employer was that I had leadership experience on my resume. So I tell people all the time, leadership saved my career. And during that job, I ended up having to fire a technician that I hired because her personal issues were getting in the way of her work attendance, and I knew that if I didn't get rid of her, that the company would get rid of me and her. And so still again very fear based. And so again, working slowly, getting better at this, and trying to find more effective ways to compensate for my ongoing conflict averse nature. And so the nice thing, even as leadership allowed more doors to open for job positions and opportunities, these jobs were not lasting very long. Their business models were only sustainable for like a year or two before they just got gobbled up or so. And so 5 years ago, when my previous employer went under, I said, well, I'm tired of chasing scripts. I'm tired of trying to fight insurance companies that dictate how much I'm worth or how much my work is worth. And I said, well, but I love people development. What if I tried to make a career out of coaching and facilitating, so because I know how much I need to be coached up to be a better leader. What if I did this instead? And again, very scared of rejection and failure. It was more of a hobby than anything else until the pandemic hit. And right as the pandemic hit, I was getting, some heavier coach training, and then, turning 40 and doing the training and seeing the pandemic hit. And I asked myself, well, what's it going to take for me to stop procrastinating on this dream of mine? So yeah, about 2 years ago, 2 years next month, I filed the LLC, got the website up, opened the bank account, and yeah, still try, struggle, fail. The first year was the only reason I covered expenses my first year was I did a lot of private tutoring and appeared on like 70 or 80 podcasts. And I got a little carried away with that, but it was so much fun. You just meet so many fun people. But yeah, second year, now that I have some more credibility and some more visibility, other doors are starting to open. And yeah, so that's the foray from pharmacist into coaching, because a lot of the challenges in pharmacy don't revolve around clinical knowledge or clinical application. It revolves around motivating your team and working well with doctors and other physicians and other healthcare practitioners. And if you don't have that set of leadership skills, you're not going to last very long.
Yeah. And I think, it's so important how, being able to have those difficult conversations as a leader, because like you said, if you just kind of let it fester and fester and fester, it's not good for anybody in the organization. And I know, in my old position with the nonprofit I used to run, like the uh, the first time that I had to fire somebody, it was, I mean, like I was sick to my stomach. It
Yep.
was just, a difficult process. And then, you just understand that at the end of the day, you're really doing, you know, yourself and your employee a favor,
Yeah.
quite frankly, at that point, if they're not performing. And if, if you've given them enough chances to prove themselves, it's, and it's something that has to be done. You just have to be able to address it and face it head on, and get that done for sure. So
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that you were able to take, what was one of your biggest hurdles in life and now use it as a stepping stone into a new chapter. But how difficult was it for you, to pull the trigger and to go get the bank account and get the LLC? And I know you said that the pandemic kind of helped you. And it's funny, I know a lot of people who did a shift during the pandemic, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's great. If there's a silver lining of,
Yeah.
what happened during the pandemic, I think a lot of people had a chance to evaluate what they were doing, and forced them to take that step and take a leap that they weren't, you know comfortable taking before. And even though it might have still been uncomfortable, they were now at a point where they were willing to take it. So how tough was it for you to get over that hump and say, all right, man, I'm gonna try it and fail,
Mm-hmm.
or try it and succeed,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not going to look back in 10
Mm-hmm.
years and say, what if?
Yeah.
Because now so
Yeah.
how was it getting over that hump?
Yeah. It took a lot, right? I tell people, I'm still conflict averse, and I tell people it's not that I got better. I did in a way, but the improvement didn't just come from getting more reps in. It also involved developing and designing a system that would compensate for me and keep me from falling back into bad habits, right? And same thing with this, right? We tell people all the time, if you want to run a marathon, start hanging out with marathoners. And so same thing with coaches. You want to be a coach, and start hanging out with coaches. And that's the blessing with International Coaching Federation, all these other organizations, because as soon as you start to meet like-minded people that are where you want to be, the more likely you are to actually get there, right? And people may ask, well, did you really want to run a marathon? And it's like, well, yeah. So that's when I started hanging out with them. So that peer pressure, it depends on your peers, right? Sometimes peer pressure is good, and that you start dieting, you start playing a sport or an instrument or dancing, right? You start hanging around the right people and you start to grow. Otherwise, you are around other ineffective peers, right? People that drag you down with like unhealthy eating habits, or illicit drugs, or things like that, right? And so yeah, at this point, yeah, you start to ask yourself, what is the cost of playing it safe? Because no one explained that to me before, right? What is the cost of your default trajectory, right? If I push away every woman that expressed interest in me and then I'm just like complaining about being single, but I'm ignoring all the opportunities that other people are trying to give me, right? Like, do I want to wake up by myself at 80, 80 years old one day, and I just wonder what happens, right? Um, and so again, yeah, same thing with the business side. And my parents don't agree with what I'm trying to do, right? At one point, when I was explaining to them that I was tutoring during the pandemic, and they said, that's a health risk. Like, why do you need the extra money? Your job as a pharmacist is okay, right? They're still like none of your paychecks are bouncing like your previous job. And I said, yeah, but I got this other side business that I really want to grow, and I need to cover the expenses from it. And they said, well, what's the side business you got going? I said, leadership coaching. Oh, no, 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 like we don't know what that is, and we don't trust it. So, you know, just be safe, be happy with your pharmacy money. And don't get me wrong, I have great hours and great bosses at my current pharmacy job. I'm grateful for those things, and I also know that I don't want to settle for it. So anyway, but yeah, the idea is, hey, what's your support system doing for you? What support are you going to put in place so that you don't default to not taking any kind of risk? And when you realize that the biggest risk is settling for the default.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that. Um, Jerry, is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to bring up to the audience?
I guess just in thinking this out loud with you, Dan, I'd be happy to just go into a little more maybe specific example of storytelling when it comes to like these difficult conversations, just so people have some real like examples they can stick their teeth into, so we're not just talking in like vague, leadership speak or other things like that, right? Um, and so I'll walk through a quick example and the framework to, kind of overlay on that. So one of the fun situations I dealt with that helped me grow my conflict resolution skills was when I served as a church class director. And my second day on the job, I found out that a newer guy was sexually harassing women in the class. And my friends come to me and say, "Hey, you got to deal with this. You're director. You didn't give me a manual. Run toward the gunfire, Jerry. Just handle it." Okay. And so the framework that I didn't have at the time, but basically one of these situations when I went back and reviewed it and realized, okay, this is the framework that I kind of walked myself through. When I had the chance to get this guy on the phone, we'll call him Nick. I got a chance to talk to Nick on the phone, and so when I first brought this up with him and said, "Hey, so there's some accusations going on," and of course he denied it straight up. He's like, "Oh, I don't know what they're talking about. That's not me." Da, da, da. And I said, "Okay." So in my mind, step one is imagine a successful conversation. What would be a successful conversation with this guy? Is it to twist his arm into apologizing even if he might be innocent? Is it just dismiss them from the class and just say, "Hey, you know what, I can't have any kind of allegations like this, so even if there's smoke and you're saying there's no fire, I still have to ask you to leave"? Or is it, "Hey, let me just convince him it is in his best interest to help address these allegations directly"? And so in my mind, yeah, option number 3 was what I was trying to get him to realize, right? And so step 2 is 10 seconds of courage. Hey, let me set this in motion. So I technically set this in motion even as I was thinking about this. So sometimes these steps have to be shuffled a little bit, but they're all there. So in this case, right, 10 seconds of courage, let me pick up the phone. 10 seconds of courage, let me bring up this difficult truth. 10 seconds of courage, let me, discuss possible strategies for him, right? So step 3 is to script my critical moves and to say, okay, what's he going to do? What do I anticipate him doing as he pushes back? Okay, he's just going to flat out deny it. Okay, so how am I going to respond to that? All right, now I'm going to give him 3 possibilities. And so I'm going to say, "Hey, Nick, look, as far as I can tell, one of 3 things is true. Number 1, you are telling the truth and they are not, which means this is a really tough misunderstanding, and it is in your best interest to clear it up directly, right? Just figure out what exactly offended them, apologize, and hopefully it won't come up again." Scenario number 2 is that they are right and you are wrong, which means you are doing some bad things, and you're gonna have to apologize and stop that immediately, and we're gonna keep a close eye on you. We're not gonna ask you to leave because this is a church thing. We want to we want everybody to find a home here, and just understand that we can't allow this kind of behavior in church, and we're gonna have to keep we're gonna make sure you're okay. Or option number 3, they insist that they are right, you insist that you are right, which means that this is their word against yours, and I have to ask you to leave because I've known them longer than I've known you, right? And so he's like, oh, sounds like I better sort things out, right? Step 4, right, is, again, this is kind of out of order, but you have to rehearse these moves. You have to say your statements out loud, so that you don't trip over your own words. Ideally, you'd have some time to like set the tough conversation, give yourself a day or two to prepare, and then practice in the mirror, practice in front of your phone, role play with some friends, get some reps in on the practice field before you play the game, right? And then step 5 is to do it, because the cost of inaction is greater than the cost of action, because you can't just say, well, it must not be a big problem. Let me just hope that it goes away on its own. And it's like, no, Jerry, women are getting hurt by this. Like, this is not acceptable. So, engage, right? Because you didn't just do all this prep work to not actually have the conversation. So, yeah, hopefully that's useful for people to say, hey, okay, this is how a conflict averse person can overcome his barriers and mental hangups, so that you can actually result in productive action.
Yeah, I love that. And I love how, being able to put it into that, I can see how that can definitely help clients get through it and understand it for sure. So, Jerry, where do people find you if they want to engage you in coaching, if they want any of your services? Where can they find you at?
Sure. So the guide that I make available for free through the website is called adaptingleaders.com/guide. If you go to adaptingleaders.com, you can book a complimentary 30-minute call, just experience, a sample of coaching, no strings attached. You can check out the free blog as well, where I summarize useful and interesting leadership literature and offer other, tips and stories. Or you can check out, other podcasts I've promoted and appeared on, just to say, hey, get to know these other podcast hosts. They're doing some really great stuff. But yeah, if you want to just sink your teeth into something useful, check out the guide, www.adaptingleaders.com/guide.
Awesome. So, Jerry, as you know, the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So I always ask my guests the same final question, and that question, from those lyrics, is, what is one of the little things that Jerry does on a daily basis to make the world a little bit better place?
Man, such a great way to end the conversation. I think every day I journal. And it sounds self-focused at first, but the reason journaling helps with other things is that it lets me dump my thoughts. Anything, whether it's toxic or just pressing on my mind, it just gets it out on paper. It gets it out of my head. And when I have a clear head, I'm able to be more present for the people that I see on a regular basis, whether it's my work team or my roommate. And so when I'm able to be more present for my spheres of influence, when I'm the best version of me to them by giving them focused attention and listening well, I think they feel that respect. And when they see that and experience that respect for themselves, I think it helps them show more respect for their own spheres of influence. And from there, we can all be more present and empathetic for each other. And even if you're having a rough day, just to, hey, you know what, maybe this will help take the edge off.
Yeah, that's huge. I love that answer. And it is so important just to be present with people. It's one of the things that Sandy and I have found we're able to do so much better than what we did in the past now that we're traveling in an RV, is that we really do live in the moment more than we ever had before. We're definitely present with people when we're able to get with them and that sort of thing. So I think that's huge, and I think your clients can definitely see, or again, doesn't have to be your clients, it's anybody you're dealing with can understand that when you're fully present. So I love that answer. But Jerry, I really appreciate the conversation. We covered a whole lot of different topics, which again is what I loved about having you on the show. And for folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. And while you're on the website, pick up a copy of my most recent book, Journey My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Jerry, again, thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. Great to talk with you.